Are we ready to go?
This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Yakkin with Ken. And for those of you who have been tuning in for our buddy Ken, he's been on hiatus for a while, but he is now returning to New Cleveland Radio. And I like the new format. You are going to have guests and you're going to yak back and forth with them, right, Ken?
Yeah, I always. Well, I'd run out of words for a while. I mean, very unusual for me, but I usually have a lot of words. I do a lot of yakking, and then all of a sudden, this year, I don't know, I hit a wall. It's like I've related to my artist self. When the artist or the musician says I can't write a song and I can't paint a picture. Well, that's what happened to me. I didn't know what happened. I just hit this wall, and I didn't have anything to say, and so I didn't say it. I didn't say anything, And slowly around, all of a sudden, I said, maybe I got a few things to talk about. So, looking forward to getting back on the radio and getting going again.
Sounds wonderful. So, tell us a little bit about your guest today.
Well, she has a story to tell, and like most people, it comes out of your history, comes out of your life, comes out of what's meaningful to you. Sometimes it takes a month or two to get it together. Sometimes it takes 40 years. And Debbie is someone who has written a book about her experience, and I think it's best that she tell her story. It's an interesting story. Like life, it's not always fun, and there's painful things involved. And for us as an audience, or us as participants, it's maybe something we can learn. We can pick up something from what she's learned and identify maybe with parts of her struggle. So let me turn it over to her, and let's hear what she can tell us.
Well, good morning, Ken and Karen. Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's my pleasure to be here. And Ken is right. I just finished writing a book. It's been released. It's called Torched by a Gaslighter. And it took me 5 weeks to write something that was 25 years in the making. And the book touches on gaslighting and domestic abuse and the red flags, especially a lot of them are just very subtle, and you question yourself all through the process of, is this right or is this normal? Until one day, really I hit the wall and attempted suicide and woke up in a psych ward, and the doctor told me your environment is making you sick. So I knew I had 3 children, and I knew I needed to make a decision, and because I wanted them to see a woman that was, strong and intelligent and capable, and, not just a woman, but their mother, and set that example for them. Also wanted to set that example of that the abuse had to stop with me, because I didn't want them to, have some of those things happen to them, nor did I want them to become victimizers of other people.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, a long process and stuff for me to kind of wake up, so to speak. But I did, and I'm glad that I did. And, to a great extent, I have felt liberated when I made the decision to leave. It was very liberating. And, then I began the process of rebuilding my life. So
Right.
One step at a time.
Good. Listen, let's structure this a little differently.
Sure.
Rather than jumping right in to what happened and your recovery from all of that. Let's go back. You're talking to a family therapist, right? So you you got to get the context. And I'd like to hear more about your childhood, like who you were when you were a little kid, and how you fit in, and what you thought the world was, and what your expectations were, like the give us a clue about, maybe what led up to your life. So
Sure.
if you can, give us the background. Where were you born? Who was in the house, and what was it like?
Sure. I was born in Santa Monica, California. I'm a native Californian. And I have, two parents that knew each other they grew up together in the West Hollywood area. So they became childhood sweethearts and eventually married. And I'm the oldest, and I have one younger sister.
How
So my
old were
dad,
they when they married?
21.
Whoa.
They were
Wow.
21. Yeah.
Back
Right?
then,
Kids
21 was
raising
normal.
kids.
Yes,
Yeah, kids raising
absolutely.
kids.
Yeah, and my dad had just returned he had been drafted in the army. He was supposed to go to Korea, and at the very last minute got taken out of that line and went to Europe, and where he spent the next 3 years chauffeuring a colonel all around Europe, checking on the troops. This was still the time when troops were occupying Europe as a result of World War II. So we're talking 1950s.
Mm.
So he got the lucky end there, driving around a colonel rather than to go to battle. But it was pretty much a normal childhood. My dad started a painting contracting business, and my mom eventually did the books and stuff. She was able to stay at home doing that part-time while they were growing their business. While my sister and I were growing up, we went to Parochial Grammar School. I went to an all-girls Catholic high school. Pretty much, I think, a sheltered life, but a good life. My parents were able to provide for us. Certainly there were, boundaries and rules. But for the most part, kind of like a Leave It to Beaver, classic home.
And what country were your parents from?
They were both from the Midwest and had come to California during the war. Their parents had moved out for work this was like the 1945-ish time frame, and their parents came looking for work out here. This is still the result of the repercussions of the Depression. My mother's side of the family had farms. I know one of her grandparents lost their farm, and so they came out looking for work. And at that time, the economy in California was booming. This was the place. This was the place to come.
Were they German?
German. I'm basically German and Irish. Yes.
Yeah, because that's the typical pattern of Germans moving to the Midwest, having farms, and some doing very well, and others having to refocus and remove and start all over again.
Yes. Yeah.
So it was a struggle in some ways for them.
Yes, and I'm into genealogy, so I've done some research and stuff. And when a lot of the family had come over, it was like in the mid 1850s. During a lot of it was, especially from Germany, it was during a lot of political unrest, and they're Catholic, so there were some issues, with them being able to practice their faith. So I give them a lot of credit. Coming to a country with barely anything to take anything and starting their lives over, and not just, finding work or, a farm or providing a livelihood, but to fit into the American culture, to learn the English language, and to try to provide a better life for the next generation. So I'm just in awe of that. And I don't know that I have that kind of spot, so to speak, to do something like that.
What do you think the 3 or 4 words that describe the emotional attitude at home? What was it? What did they believe in that they were teaching you?
Hard work,
Figured.
determination, persistence, and one thing is independence. I know my dad had said something about, you don't ask others for help, you just find a way of doing it.
Right.
And I later learned that that's not healthy, because it's okay to give, it's okay to help people, you're denying them the ability to help you if you don't have that reciprocation. So that is something that, to be honest with you, I'm still kind of working on.
Yeah. Anytime things got rough and I would bitch or complain, my mother would tell me about her father, who came from Germany on the boat. And when he got here, he was 9 years old, spoke German,
Mm-hmm.
and got a job in New York City as an apprentice in a picture frame making operation. And he worked that for 70 years.
Wow.
You know, and went to work, took a ferry and a bus and a whatever carriage horse to get to work, worked a 10-hour day, came home, and he was a teenager. Talk about, you
Yeah.
know, where was baseball and where was the girls and where was sitting at home doing your homework. He knew nothing of that. So, you know, and she always talked about that as being well, if you think you got it bad, or if you think your life is rough, you know, take a look at this, you know.
Yeah. And sometimes
And
it
so
was about,
it just gave you this, there was no out from that, you know. You
right,
just
right.
was shut down. You had to do what you're supposed to do and shut up.
Yeah. 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 And again, it's like always trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes to look at it from their
Mhm.
perspective. But somebody always has it rougher than you, so to speak, you know.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's like, it's one way of kind of denying that there are issues. You know, it's like somebody else has it worse, you know, I'm okay.
Mhm.
Let's move on.
What were the expectations for you when you were growing up? What did your mother expect of you?
I think both of my parents, you know, expected me to do well in school, do, you know, I'm brought up Catholic, so to be the good little Catholic girl. And, you know, those in and of itself were high expectations, you know, just walk that line.
That's when the church still had a good reputation in terms of their teaching the kids.
Yes, and there were still nuns in the, gosh, I remember the nuns were in the full habits, you know, and just as Vatican II was starting to implement itself into the church, I still remember mass being said in Latin. So, and I was a little girl at that time, but I still remember it's been a lot of changes in the church. But you know, yes, I mean it's kind of like walk the line. It took me many years um, to realize it's just not about the rules that we were always so entrenched in going through parochials, especially grammar school. You know, it's about having that relationship with God. And when that flipped that switch for me, it had all the difference in the world. And then I could really see how much God had loved me and protected me, you know, and has guided me. And it's my faith, I know, that has gotten me through a lot, you know, several challenges.
And did you ever question it when it started to get rough about where is he?
Yes, I was in a very bad car accident in my early 20s, and I went through the windshield, broke both kneecaps.
Ooh.
It took an extensive amount of physical therapy and several surgeries. And when it happened, I was like, why did God, what did I do to deserve this? What did I
Were you
do to,
driving or you a passenger?
no, I
Or?
was a passenger. My ex was driving. He pretty much walked away from, you know, he had a couple scrapes and he rolled, the car rolled. I mean, it was extensive impact. But he stayed with the car and he walked away. No broken bones, just a couple scrapes and bruises.
And what'd you think about that experience? What conclusion did you come to?
Well, there's a little bit more to that story, in that it happened out in the desert. I was actually off work that week, and he wanted me to come with him to a job that he was doing out in the desert. And I didn't really want to go because I was trying to get caught up and, you know, it's my time and vacation stuff. So, you know, he uh, got upset that I didn't want to go with him. And so I reluctantly went. And on our way back, that's when we were kind of T-boned. And his boss had come out to take him home, but I was left in the desert for a few days by myself in the hospital, all these scrapes and bruises and the one nurse had to painstakingly wash my hair. I mean, I was just full of road debris and blood.
He left you in the hospital?
Yes.
What'd you think of that?
I felt very alone.
Yeah.
Very alone, very abandoned. And
It's
again,
still in
even
you.
by God, it's like,
Yeah.
what did I do to deserve this?
Yeah, well, that's a deep one. You can
It
still
is.
see it on your face now.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's real trauma.
Yes.
And they don't go away.
No, but time, what do they say? Time heals all wounds, so they say.
Until
I've
the
gotten
next
a
trauma.
lot past it. I don't think that it ever erases anything, but you can deal with it better. Yes, it's a painful memory,
Yeah.
but out of that, I always look for something good out of every situation. And that's when, as I was recuperating, that's when I became pregnant with my oldest one. So I know, again, God's timing, had I not gotten pregnant, that was my incentive really to get better and to go through all the physical therapy. The physical therapy to learn how to walk again and bend your legs and stuff, that was brutal. But
Wow.
knowing that I knew I had to take care of a baby, that a baby was coming, I'd have to take care of him, was a great incentive for me. So again, I've had things happen and there's always been the silver lining. And it's like, okay, let me focus on that positive. That's how I'm going to move forward through this.
Yeah, well, how fortunate for you to have that aspect in you, that it helps you look to recover, or helps you look out of yourself to say, I'm still here, I'm okay, and I'm going to get back on the horse, and I'm going to go do what I got to do.
Kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier,
Sure.
About somebody always has it worse than you. So just suck it up and move forward. So I think, to some
Well,
extent,
I can identify with that. It's very Germanic, I mean, hard work, dust yourself off, get going, and, stop bitching about it, and then, make something out of,
make lemonade out of the lemons.
Yeah,
right?
make the lemonade,
Yep.
and that's as a therapist, I saw many people that were not fortunate enough to have that. And when they got knocked down, they stayed down and they got secondary gain for getting knocked down, and they learned alternate ways of feeling sorry for themselves. And others became dependent, others became depressed, others became drug addicted. You see a lot of people that went off the curve and didn't learn the dust yourself off process.
Yeah.
And so you got to thank your parents for putting that in you and giving you that. And your spirituality helps.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
if you think you're alone, but somebody's watching you, you're not alone.
Correct. Yep, absolutely. That's been my saving grace, and you're right. I mean, it's because of all of that, and again, even researching my genealogy and seeing all that and realizing all that, I have a lot to be thankful for. I mean, yes, have I gone through some challenges and stuff? Yes, but I'm a survivor, and I've learned some lessons, and I hope that I can pass on some of the lessons that I've learned to make somebody else, including my own children's life, better and maybe easier, and not repeat some of the mistakes that I made.
Yeah. I think in everyone's life, there's maybe a day or there's a certain specific time where you make a real philosophical decision about your life. And you can be a child when you make this decision. But when I was 15, my dad died suddenly. And my mother, who was 43 years old at the time, was so seriously depressed that she stayed in bed for 2 years. there wasn't any psychotropic meds back then. Nobody had antidepressants walking around, you know. So my father goes, and then my mother is in the bed, and you know, I'm 16. I just turned 16, and okay, what do I do now? There's no parents. There's no more guidance. Whatever I got, and is it going to be enough? And at that time, I said no. I didn't get enough. I need a hell of a lot more.
Yeah.
And I decided that I had to find it somewhere else because it wasn't in front of me. And if I was going to, from what I knew about life, I wasn't going to be able to steer the car. You know, I had no idea. And therefore, I came up with this philosophy is that I have to seek and find others to help me. And that's what I did. I went and looked for older men, and you know, some of them gave good advice, and some of them didn't. But I always wondered when I was in college, how come I'm a freshman and I'm hanging out with the seniors? Because I needed that.
Yeah.
And we all have to get to this point where you have to figure out what you really need, not what you want, what you need. And then go for what you need. I've used that my whole life with the patients and people who have come to me, and I tell them, you know, forget about what you want. You know, that you'll never that road will never end because when you want this and you get it, you want more. But look out for what you need and see if you can find what you need. And you seem to be someone who's done that. You found a way to keep steady on your feet. And keep going forward.
I have tried, and trust me when I say I pray. I've prayed a lot, and there's been some nights when I've cried myself to sleep praying, you know, because, you know, life can be a little bit challenging, you know, at times, and that's okay.
Did
Nobody
you
ever promised a perfect life.
when you were getting married? How old were you?
I was 19.
19.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, by today's standard, that's a child.
Yes.
Right. And you thought you would get married, and what was going to be your guiding principle? What were you going to do with getting married? What was it?
What was it? You know, I looked forward to being a wife and mother, and, you know, having that family. Again, being raised Catholic, divorce was never in our vocabulary. So I knew, you know, this was a commitment for life.
Mm-hmm.
And thought I had found the right person, the one
Yeah.
he said he
So you
loved
had
me.
a lot of ideals and ideas,
Yes,
and not a lot of experience,
yes, that's correct.
right? And
Yep.
so, you know, if you look at that from a clinical point of view, you're vulnerable.
Yes.
You're vulnerable because you're trusting one person to guide you, and everything's going to work out from there. And hope your picker is good.
Yes. And it turned out not to be so good. So.
Well, you wouldn't expect it to be at 19. Who can make that deep a decision at 19? Who can really see what character is all about and integrity is all about? You know,
Right.
the hormones are in the way. You have your idea. You know, you look at fantasies. You know, there's all kinds of things that interplay into. Oh, it's going to be so nice. I'm going to have the house, the picket fence, and we're going to have 2 dogs. And
And going back to the Leave It to Beaver, you know, ideal, you know, because I wanted what I grew up with.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
it sounds like what you grew up was pretty good.
It was good.
You know,
So
and I mean, like
wanted to
kids
pass
that have a
along.
lot of adversity and problems and see a brutal marriage in their parents, you know, everybody feels sorry for them. Oh, they've come from a broken home, or they come from this, and yet you look at that; those kids are a little bit more prepared for adversity.
Yes.
They're
Yes.
prepared for, you know, when the ink drops on the paper. So tell us your story from that point. Now you're married and you got your ideal.
I have my ideal that, well, interesting part of this is as the day I was getting married and getting, right as my dad and I entered the church, my stomach flipped. And I didn't know, kind of what it was. And I remember grabbing on to my dad, and my dad said, you can back out if you want to. But then I'm looking at 200 pairs of eyes looking at me. I'm at the entrance of the church. I kind of chalked it up to wedding day jitters. So I was like, no, I'm going through with this. And about, I don't know, 1 to 2 months into the marriage, we had a small earthquake. And my ex was at work at the time. So I called my parents and said, hey, did you feel that? You guys okay? I don't like earthquakes. I mean, I know I'm a native Californian, but no, I have an earthquake app on my phone. I'm terrified of them. Anyway, he comes home as I'm talking to my parents and, kind of motions, who are you talking to? So I mouthed, my family, and he made a motion like hang up the phone. So I quickly got off the phone, and he blew up at me for calling my family because I was scared. And he said, you don't call them for that. You call me. Well, this was before cell phones and all that kind of technology. I had no way of getting a hold of them. And he slapped me. He slapped me hard on the face and then put his fist through the wall. And I never saw my dad hit my mother or even remotely. Did they argue from time? Yeah, but not physical, not anything like that. So this was all really brand new, and it scared the you-know-what out of me. And that was like the beginning of really starting to walk on eggshells.
Did you tell anybody?
No. In fact, my sister had come over, I want to say a day or two later. She sees the hole in the wall and she's looking at it, and I lied. And I said, oh, we were moving something, and it, the wall.
Now that's
made a
very
hole in the wall.
interesting.
It made a dent in the wall.
That's
And
very interesting, because here you are, goody two shoes, Catholic girl, married, now happy, everything's going well, and all of a sudden you lie.
Yeah.
Why?
I didn't want to admit that I made a mistake.
And had you admitted and saw that red flag for what it was, life would have changed for you right then.
Yes.
There was the first signal. If you didn't catch it, well, you're going to see that one again.
Yeah, I mean, he did all the crying and, oh, I'm so sorry, I should never have done this, I'll never do it again, and blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah.
I have to say that he never did hit me again, but years later, he really hit one of my kids.
He what?
He beat one of my kids, bruised him badly.
Did you do anything then?
It was very hard for me to do it. I had a 2-year-old, and I was like 6 months pregnant. And so I felt trapped. I couldn't protect, it's like, which child do I protect? The one in my womb, or trying to get to him as quickly as possible for it to stop. And then it did stop. But I remember, laying in bed that night and scared. It's like,
Of course.
I couldn't tell anybody, again, because it's admitting that I made a mistake. And it's like, my parents, what are they going to say? They're going to, again, it's all the mindset and the thoughts that we say. It's like, oh, well, you made your bed, you live in it, you stay in it.
Did you know you needed help?
Not then, no.
And see, there's the protective innocence of your childhood shows up. You don't even know that, whoops, this is not normal. This is not supposed to happen. And, there's a lot of, maybe there wasn't that many books out about it then, but there were some. But, there were counselors back then. There were groups. In the 60s, I ran groups of women that came in with your story to the emergency room where I saw them, and they would wound up in a support group upstairs, all trapped, all with young kids, all without jobs, and all would have various forms of abusive and controlling men in their life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was still not really aware of it. It was still even maybe about 5 years later. I actually went to, when I was doing my grocery shopping, I was in the checkout line, and there's one of those national women's magazines.
Indeed.
There was a recipe on the cover, and I thought, well, that looked good, picked it up for that, not knowing that there was an article in there about a woman writing about verbal abuse. And didn't read it right away. It was a couple of days later. And in reading that article, the woman talks about how when her husband would come home from work, her stomach would start flipping. And
Mhm.
that was a trigger for me to remember my wedding day.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay. And then it started to happen to me when my ex came home. He was a traveling salesman, would leave Monday, come back Friday. And that happened the first few times. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, that's when I realized
How
there's
to
something
read the
more here.
psychosomatic symptoms of my own body. How do I understand what my body is trying to tell me?
Yeah.
It's all right there. I don't even have to think about it. It's right there. I just have to interpret it correctly.
Yeah. And I'm really good at denying what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. It's just like, okay, well, I got to do this. This is what I'm to do. Let's just move forward. Not really thinking through. I deny my feelings a lot. I obviously denied them for many years.
Sure.
I realized, those roll top desks, and they've got all the pigeonholes. Well, it finally came to a point that there was no more room in those pigeonholes for me to stuff
Yeah.
all of the
Yeah.
years of feelings. So
Yeah.
hence I became very depressed.
Yeah. I mean, your story, your what you're telling us is so typical of women that get themselves into further trouble.
Yeah.
Because they don't read what's going on and stand up for themselves is really what it comes down to. You don't know that you're allowed to say no to this. You
Right.
don't know that this is unacceptable. You have to break through your own denial, your own displacement, your own rationalization. Everybody makes excuses. I mean, back in the day, look at an alcoholic family system. The
Yes.
amount of excuses that they make for the alcoholic, if he is the one or she is the one that is bringing home the money in the family, because they need the money, and so they'll wake him up, they'll lie to his boss, and they'll do all kinds of enabling behavior to keep the system the same.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you're protecting a predator.
Yes.
And the predator, I mean, there was a great book, I used to give it out, that said how to make a monster. And how to make a monster is you just keep feeding it. You keep feeding it. You don't do anything to, it's getting bigger and bigger, and it's destroying more things. And you think, well, if you get a bigger house, it will, there'll be more room for him. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it really is, the story of so many women of the generation before Me Too stood up and said, I'm not going to take this anymore. And I got support from the sisterhood. I got support from everybody now, and I got a voice. And,
Yes.
and there were so many women that lived trapped, especially if you look back in the past generation, your mother's generation, the
Absolutely.
40s and 50s, how they had no chance. They had no chance because they didn't have at least the wherewithal of earning their own money. The women came along after the 60s and the 70s, started to make their own money, and therefore they made marriage decisions that were a lot different because they weren't dependent and trapped in the situation based on just money.
Right. Right.
And to learn how to live with that, you have to have a lot of denial. You have to have a lot of displacement of your own emotions. And you see so many women who had a lot of medical conditions because of their displacement. It was all buried anger. It was all buried sadness. It was buried everything.
I remember the therapist telling me that depression is actually anger turned inward.
Inward,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and I never understood that until I wrote this book.
Mhm.
And when I'm writing, about this, some incidents and stuff, and I'm realizing, oh my God, I really was angry. And because I did not leave a suicide note, and it was on purpose. But I didn't realize how calculating I was back then until I wrote it. It came out in the book, and that's when I realized I was angry. Now I get it about the
Angry
depression.
and trapped.
Yes. Yeah, that was the only way I
I
knew how
mean,
to lash out. It's
suicide
the
is
only
a
way I
no
knew how to
exit.
escape.
Suicide attempts are a no exit philosophy. There's no way out of this other than to call it quits.
Yeah.
And luckily, you didn't succeed.
And by the grace of God, he had something else planned for me.
Yeah, he was there.
He was there.
Yeah.
I
Well,
remember
at some
praying.
point, that's why I mentioned it earlier. At some point, you lost him too. Because you wouldn't, if you really thought you were still being watched and there was going to be a road, no matter how bad it is, if you look at the men that have written about living in dungeons and, put in dungeons, not their own fault, and had to survive living in a dungeon. Who's watching me? Who knows I'm here?
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell us more about, your book and what you wrote.
I came about this in a different process. It's about two women, different ages, different walks of life. They come across each other and meet in a park and become friends. One is older. She's been through and gone through a domestic violence situation. And the younger one is suspecting that she may, that something's not right at home. So they strike up a friendship, and that's how a lot of what's happened to me has come out through some of these, the stories and the conversations. And there's, a little bit of tragedy, kind of thrown in there. You can't have everything peachy keen, right? But it really is, the purpose is really to show the red flags, some of the red flags, especially for me, it was isolation. I was totally isolated from family, friends, and that was else helped contribute to the depression, I believe. And and just how subtle, these red flags can play on you, and it's easy to kind of deny it. It's easy to kind of chalk it up to something else. Maybe he's had a bad day, that's why he's so angry. And because it's not so easy, because I think there's people that think, well, why did I stay 17 years? Well, it's not that easy, and because not every day was a bad day. There were a lot of good days. And when you have children involved, you're thinking in terms of what's in their best interest as well. And then it goes back to money and support. I was a stay-at-home mom, really wasn't allowed to work either.
Yeah.
Outside the house to do that.
It's
So
generally referred to as the golden handcuffs.
yes, I hadn't heard that before, but I like that. So yes, I was trapped, I was handcuffed, but I just kind of want to show the subtleties that, if it was a magazine article that woke me up, maybe this book might help somebody and wake somebody else up.
Beautiful.
And really, at the end of the day, I got out, I rebuilt my life. Was it always easy? No, but I did it. I put myself back through college. I raised two of the three kids. I now have relationships. There was parental alienation involved with the divorce and stuff as well with the oldest one. But I reestablished all of the relationships, and life is good. It's taken me a long time, but I can actually say I'm happy.
Maybe you should put your book in the checkout line in the supermarket.
Absolutely.
Somebody come along and they see your book, and then it'll help them.
Yeah, well, maybe, yes. Yeah, that's really what I want to do, is just to show the subtleties and, get people to think, is like, is everything right at home? Maybe it's not. And to start asking those questions and work it out, whether it's you can rebuild that marriage and to a healthy relationship, or if you can't, then get out and rebuild your life and be healthy
Mhm.
and happy.
My question, from a therapist's point of view, you discover your anger.
Mhm.
What'd you do when you discovered it?
Well, back in the day, that was the suicide attempt, which I didn't realize was the anger. I didn't know how to escape other than to attempt suicide, I guess. Once I decided to leave, and made that decision, it was very, very liberating. I think the biggest pain for me was really the guilt I felt about my oldest child getting beaten. And as a Catholic, it was many years later, I happened to be going to confession and, talking with the priest, and he said, I brought up the divorce, and it had been even 17 years after I'd gotten the divorce. And he said, there are chains that are still binding you. And I went, what are you talking about? He goes, have you ever thought about going through the annulment process? And I said, Father, it's been 17 years since, I've been divorced, and the church isn't going to look at that. He goes, you'd be surprised. I went, okay. So it took me a few more months, like another 6 more months, before I had the courage to go to the parish pastor and say, can I get the paperwork for this? And then even another few more months to do it. And it's quite a lengthy process. Let me tell you, it's not easy, nor should it be easy. But there was one night when I was writing about that incident, and I broke down. I have never cried so hard and like from my gut as I did when I wrote about that. And I realized is that I never forgave myself. God had long forgiven me. I never forgave myself for feeling that I have allowed that to happen. And so that was very, very freeing for me.
That's
So
healing.
even very free. It just, as I said, I got retching sobs. I don't think I ever cried like that before, and I've never, knock on wood, never cried like that since. But
Yeah,
it
but that
was
was a
real.
good one.
That was a good one.
That
That
was a
was
good one.
a lifelong. That
Yeah.
was all for many, many years. And as I wrote the chapter in the book about this, it's still painful. I mean, it kind of brought tears to my eyes, but not. I'm okay with it now. I mean, I do feel bad that happened, but I don't feel guilty about it. And my son and I have spoken about it, and he's very aware that I put that in the book.
Excellent. That's a good role model for everybody to see what you finally got, what was underneath it all. And it was all there all along. And your recognition of it. Look, you talk about boldness and power. Look what it's done for you.
I actually, it's taken me 63 years to have a voice.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like any writer. They have to find their voice. You can't write anything. You can't write anything. You can't write anything. And then all of a sudden, a voice comes out. And once you put the first 10 words down, 10,000 words follow, 20,000 words follow.
Yeah.
It's just like all of a sudden there's a strength that comes from a very clear, honest, direct connection to your inner self. It's like,
That and
hello, here I
right.
am.
And that for God too, because for the last couple of years, I've been feeling like I need to be doing something, but I didn't know what. And I kind of went one direction, is like, well, I keep getting these roadblocks, now what? I happened to meet somebody who said, well, I just wrote a book and a little bit
Right.
about my story and things like that. And then that's when my wheels started. And it's like, well, maybe that's what I need to do. And then when I realized, it all came out within 5 weeks, and I never did
Yeah.
have writer's block. It just
Who,
came.
who published your book?
Motivation Champs, Dominic Dominski.
And are you signed with them to do any readings?
Not yet. I'm working on getting that done. So I'd like to do that.
Yeah. When I wrote mine, I did the readings at Barnes and Noble, and that, it brings in all kinds of, and then you have an audience there
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
they've read your book or they're going to read your book, and they ask you questions, and then you start talking, and before you know it, it's over, and then there's a whole line of people who want to talk to you.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm in the
And
process of
and
getting
then
set up.
you really get to feel like, wow, I can really help these people now. I know what
Yeah.
I'm talking about. I
Yeah.
know where
Yeah.
you are. I know what, you see the ones that are a little bit cowering, and you know what it's all about.
And before the book was released, I had been, talking a bit about it on social media. I have LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and I had had several people, even before the book was released, just say thanking me for being bold enough to write something about it. And, you hear, I'm obviously not alone. There's a lot of other women and even men. This happens to men as well, that have gone through being gaslighted, going through some kind of domestic abuse, and, being thanked, and, just bringing this subject to light. And I think that in alone it's helping people. They're kind of waking up. It's like, oh, well, that happened to her. And, you know, they're
Well,
realizing that it's happening to them.
Debbie, when I had you on my show, one of the things that came out was I started opening up to you.
Yes.
And I haven't opened up like that, probably 30 years now. And there are more things that have been coming out. And it's so relieving to know that my responsibility was that I didn't get out sooner.
Yeah.
But the fact that when I did get out, I survived, as difficult as it was. And to all your listeners, we're all going to still feel these pains on and off through the rest of our life. It's
Yeah.
not going to go away, but we're going to react to them differently. And you and your book just made me feel like, okay, I am a survivor. And if I feel the pain, that's all right. I'm going to acknowledge it and then move on. So
Exactly.
thank you.
Thank you. That's probably one of the nicest things people have said to me. So, but it is
Mhm.
generating those kind of comments. And, I've always, again, it's part of my faith, we all are here to know, love, and serve the Lord. And if this is serving the Lord, is by bringing this out. And, let's do better for ourselves. Let's do better for our kids. Let's do better for our future generations. There's way too much violence out there, and let's try and figure out how we can all interact better with each other without the abuse, without the violence.
Yeah, mine. I had an abusive mother, and when I was 16, she would always hit me, and I finally stopped her. I grabbed her arms as she was trying to hit me, and once I grabbed her arms, she tried to kick me, and so I now had to learn that I didn't have to. I had to watch out for the feet as well as the arms.
Yeah.
But what my point was, my physicality is what saved me. I was a boy, and I grew, and I got stronger, and I could defend myself. It wasn't a thought. It wasn't how to defend it was just a physical response to this woman. And finally, she saw my strength because I really grabbed her arms. And I said, "You're not going to do this anymore. It's going to stop." And it stopped, but we didn't talk anymore.
Yeah.
The relationship stopped. And so I'd solved one problem, but boy, I created a problem in the kitchen for myself. I had to make my own food from now on. but the lesson was it had to end at some point, and at some point you maybe just instinctually you do something right and it stops it. But you're very inspirational. I'm very, very moved by your story today. I mean, you really,
Thank you.
you're a good person at heart all the way down. And you could see my my analogy for you is the mouse that roared,
I like that. Yeah. His parting words to me was, you'll never make it and no one will ever love you.
Yeah.
And those were the wrong things to say. I mean, I have made it. I, was able to put myself back through college, and, I've worked myself up into a career, being able to provide for the kids. Again, I'm happy. And again, it was writing this book. Sometimes it's that love part that has gotten to me, where I can sometimes get stuck. And it was in writing the book is realized that's not love. That's, and I certainly don't want any part of that. If you think, no one will ever love me like that, you're right. No one will ever love me like that. If that's your definition of love, it ain't happening again. So.
Yeah. And do you have a copy of your book hanging around nearby right now?
I do. Hold on just a second. I've actually started a LLC called Broken to Boldness, and you can see it on the back. And
Good.
it's really, again, to, I've got some resources on there. You can also order the book through the website, and as well as Barnes and Noble. And it's just trying to be inspirational and helping people if they suspect that they may be in a situation. There's resources that you can call or email or just go on their websites to kind of learn more, because I'm not the expert, but I want to just provide people avenues.
And you have a downloadable version too? You have it on Kindle and stuff?
Not yet. It probably in a couple of weeks it'll go on Kindle, but hopefully, I'm not sure if you can see it. It's called Torched, Burnt by Gaslighter.
Nice.
And I love
I
the
hope
cover.
it becomes a bestseller.
Well, I hope so. I hope so too. Just trying to get the word out. Again, you can buy it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, or on my website at www.brokentoboldness.com.
Good for you. Yay.
Thank you.
You are
Thank you so
wonderful,
much.
Debbie.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this today.
Well, it's been a joy having you on the show. I mean, I know it might be hard to talk about all this stuff and get it out there, but you're very inspirational, and I'm taking away a very positive feeling from your story today. And thank you so much, Debbie Griffiths.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. And Ken, it's so good to have you back on again. And we'll come up with another show in a few weeks. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank
All right.
you.
Bye, Karen.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Debbie.